This program is brought to you by First National Bank of Botswana. Good evening and a very warm welcome to First Issues. Thank you so much for joining us. Following the national budget presentation themed A New Era of Economic Transformation and Fiscal Prudence by Vice President and Minister of Finance, Honorable Ndaba Kgaolate, all eyes turned to the annual First National Bank Botswana Budget Review Seminar. Under the theme, Cementing Our True North, Unlocking Sustainable Growth, industry leaders and policymakers gathered to dissect a budget that is thought to signal a major shift, moving the government from being the primary driver of the economy to becoming the architect of a private sector-led environment. Tonight, we bring you conversations from the seminar led by the bank's Chief Executive Officer, Stephen Bogatsu.
It is my pleasure to welcome you to the FNB Botswana Budget Review Seminar 2026. At this morning's session, a consistent message was echoed. Growth requires disciplined execution, and across all topics from SME development to capital markets and financial innovation, it is clear that productivity, coordination, and reform momentum will determine Botswana's next phase of progress. Ladies and gentlemen, despite pockets of resilience within the economy, underlying structural challenges remain. These are evident in subdued long-term growth, constrained fiscal capacity, and increasing pressure on public and private capital resources. In the short term, growth is expected to recover only moderately, with liquidity challenges presenting headwinds to Botswana's outlook as the economy continues to rebalance. As we share insights on the national budget speech today, let us use this platform not only to analyze what has been announced, but to align on what must be done. If we are serious about cementing our true north, then we must move decisively from intention to implementation, from conversation to impact.
Despite a projected GDP growth rate of 3.1%, the nation still faces a significant budget deficit of 26.35 billion pula. This compares to a contraction of 0.9% in 2025 and a budget deficit of 22.12 billion pula for the national budget of 2025-26. With inflation holding steady at 3.9% as of December 2025, the goal of the 2026-27 national budget is very clear. Stabilize today to secure a sustainable tomorrow. But how does that happen? Where are the low-hanging fruits that could be harvested for sustained long-term growth? What are the structural reform imperatives and diversification pathways for Botswana? Our conversation is with economist at First National Bank Ghana, Julien Ayippey, and World Bank country representative for Botswana, Liang Wang. Thank you so much for coming on First Issues and affording us your time. We're here today to share some insights from the First National Bank of Botswana's Budget Review Seminar following the delivery of the national budget for 2026-2027. And right there, what are your impressions of the national budget?
It's a very difficult speech because the country is in a very difficult economic situation. When you are in a situation, then you have less resources for you to deploy but you have that ambition to achieve. It is about how do you do more with less. I think the budget wants to convey that direction. I would say it is a rallying call by the minister, by the vice president, by the government, to the whole government and to the whole society. And indeed, in the spirit of speech, how do we do economic transformation while stick to fiscal prudence?
I think for the first time, I did recognize that, and most of you did allude to it, that it was a bit of a lengthy discussion or a statement that was hard, and I think it was very necessary because he had to clearly spell out the reforms that we're about to take, especially noting where you are as a country. So that required a lot of thought process. That required a lot of careful explanation to the things that will cause the reform and the reset. So generally, yes, he did speak to that. He did clarify what he wanted to do, the BATP, the NDP 12. All the flagship programs that they wanted to deliver, and most importantly, looking at how to manage the debt ceiling as well, which has now become imperative for them for growth.
So, Liang, the World Bank is going to be a partner to the government in helping her achieve some of these ambitions that we find in the national budget. So, in that regard, what structural reforms do you think need to be adopted if government is going to be successful in these endeavors?
The vice president and the minister used this term called total factor productivity in framing the way to think about the growth strategy for Botswana. And that's the right framework. What does total factor productivity mean? It means with the same amount of inputs, how much outputs the country, the economy is producing. And by that measurement, Botswana's productivity has been going down, right? Which means you're putting more money but producing less, right? So in economic theory, there is, and also the empirical experience from many other countries, there is a formula in enhancing productivity. Applying to the Botswana's context, I'll make 5 very quick points. 1, restoring macro and fiscal stability. Second, education, human capital. How do you improve education? How do you have your labor force with the right skills for the market? Third, infrastructure. How do you have digital connectivity as well as the physical connectivity, but done in a much more efficient and cost-effective way? Fourth, market efficiency. How do you support SMEs? And finally, it is the institutions' efficiency. It is about how government can do better, how government can be more efficient.
We will see you shortly after commercial break with more insights from the FNB Botswana Budget Review Seminar. Stay tuned to First Issues.
bitsa motho gore motho a leke mangwala e go duela metsi.
Mama, kana male jana ha o tlhoka le go tsamela kgakala gore go duela metsi. FNB re diretse tiro motho.
Senthe.
Ma kwa go marekisetsong a ile gore ana le tshwala FNB Cash Plus. Se se tlhokanyela ke o mangwa gago mo tirisong le reference number e bon dinomoro tse diriswang go ruratsa dituelo tsa gago.
FNB what?
FNB Cash Plus.
Madonna makante ke monto samplele ka mananeo ya FNB ya Cash Plus.
La ha re le nna ke gone go utang ka dona ebile ke be ke sa dumele.
Deposit cash and coins, withdraw from e-wallet, make cardless cash withdrawals, buy prepaid airtime and electricity, pay bills such as water, electricity and many more.
FNB. Dona. Nyawa ene ke ra sa thare. Mpare mo tiki. Na ke ra go motho go thoela mamarapedi. Go tola skontere hela. Wa go se mo sungwa go duela se mo su. Manane wa FNB Cash Plus.
FNB, how can we help you?
It's a very difficult speech because the country is in a very difficult economic situation. When you are in a situation, then you have less resources for you to deploy. but you have that ambition to achieve. It is about how do you do more with less.
I did recognize that, and most of you did allude to it, that it was a bit of a lengthy discussion or a statement that was had, and I think it was very necessary because he had to clearly spell out the reforms that we're about to take, especially noting where you are as a country. So that required a lot of thought process, that required a lot of careful explanation to the things that will cause the reform and the reset.
Thank you so much for staying with First Issues as we continue unpacking the FNB Botswana Budget Review Seminar with the economist at First National Bank Ghana, Julien Ayippey, and World Bank Country Representative for Botswana, Liang Wang. Julien, you are based in a market that had hit rock bottom at some point in its existence, right? What do you think Botswana could learn from Ghana so that we don't find ourselves in a situation where we are at rock bottom with economic insecurities?
Once you're pinned to the wall, the only way you have to go is to go forward, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the most important things is to recognize where you are. Mm-hmm. So in strategy, you need to recognize where you are. You need to have an idea of where you're going. And you need to chart out a course to get there. And I think that is what the minister was trying to do in the budget reading. What I think is one thing that we need to be very strategic on is the fact that, yes, we've recognized that we are in a position of our backs are against the wall. There's no turning back. We also have an idea of where we want to get to, but now the problem lies with charting the course and execution. Over the period, you've seen African countries having a plethora of solutions when it comes to charting the course. But what I've realized is it all boils down to committing to that execution, being disciplined about that execution. And also it's all about change of government. Now, where we are is not a function of the government. It's a function of actually where we are as a country. If a government changes, is it going to change its course? We've seen it in many African countries, even including ours, that once everybody has a different solution to it, we chart a course. Let's just pin this framework down, and it shouldn't be dependent on which government comes in or not. It should be a well-structured approach, which everybody agrees, both parties, if it's a tripartite, all those parties have inputs in it, and then you commit to execution so that wherever you get to, that you are done. Another party, should it come in, should be able to continue it and get to where your destination is.
You know, this budget focuses on some key areas that could be looked into to diversify the economy, seeing that we have been a natural minerals-led economy for the very longest time. And some of these areas include agriculture and energy. But in your view, what are some of those low-hanging fruit that could be harvested to ensure that we're seeing positive outcomes in the immediate or medium term?
You know, in a very straightforward way, in economics, there's this thing called comparative advantage. You know, everybody knows. Yeah. What are the sectors Botswana has comparative advantage? You spoke about energy. I think that's correct. Botswana has lots of sun. There's a huge pipeline of solar and renewable energy project that's ready to move on the country. It's very important for the government as the government start doing those big energy project, very important to communicate with the market clearly and credibly, right? So that's really important. Similarly, agriculture. If you look at agriculture, you know, the biggest subsector under agriculture is livestock. Yeah. Botswana is known and very proud of the beef, but how can we do that better? How can we produce more? How can we make the market work better so that Botswana can benefit more from from its the beloved kettles, right? So I think those are obvious areas Botswana can and should be working on. Last example I give quickly is tourism, right? Botswana has been the destination of wildlife safari destinations. There's a lot of potential and space to do more in terms of different product offerings. Can we keep tourism in the country a little bit longer? Can we take them to other places? I think there's some ongoing efforts towards that direction. I think those are all very encouraging.
So looking at Botswana, diversification is good, and I'm glad he mentioned that as in moving away from a resource-reliant economy, a natural resource-reliant economy, to finding ways of diversification. He mentioned education, he mentioned infrastructure, he mentioned agric. My view is that looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, people continue to eat, pretty much. So there will always be demand for food, and Botswana is known to have quite the best meat that I've tasted so far in many countries that I've gone to. Looking at animal production and animal husbandry, how are you going to tackle that value chain? And I just don't mean just producing the meat or just producing the farms. How do you turn it into mechanized farming such that you go a step beyond just producing the meat but processing? In anything that you do, and that's why I think it's the low-hanging fruit, because already you have the vast land to be able to do that. You have people who are committed to farming. How do we support them such that they build a very all-inclusive value chain approach to animal farming, such that now you become the gateway for animal farming and animal exports? I believe that is what will get there, because if Botswana is then seen not as just diamond but animal farming, then it becomes a very good sell for you to boost your economy, and that, I believe, is the low-hanging fruit.
ta bitsa motho gore motho a leke mangwala go duela metsi.
Mama, ka male jana o tlhoka le go tsamela kgakala gore go duela metsi. FNB re diretse tiro motho. Ma kwa go marekisetsong a ile gore ana le tshwala FNB Cash Plus. So se tlhokanyela ke o mang wa gago mo tirisong le reference number e bong dinomoro tse diriswang go ruragatsa dituelo tsa gago.
FNB what?
FNB Cash Plus.
Madonna makante ke mo ntse samplele ka mananeo ya FNB ya Cash Plus.
La ha re le nna ke gone go utang ka dona ebile ke be ke sa dumele.
Deposit cash and coins, withdraw from e-wallet, make cardless cash withdrawals, buy prepaid airtime and electricity, pay bills such as water, electricity and many more.
FNB. Dona. Nyawa ena ke ra sa thare. Mpare mo tiki. Na ke ra go motho hela mamarapedi. O tola skontere hela. O bua go semosong wa go duela semosong. Manane wa FNB Cash Plus.
FNB, how can we help you?
Once you're pinned to the wall, the only way you have to go is to go forward, right? And one of the most important things is to recognize where you are. So in strategy, you need to recognize where you are. You need to have an idea of where you're going. And you need to chart out a course to get there. And I think that is what the minister was trying to do in the budget reading.
Botswana has been the destination of wildlife safari destinations. There's a lot of potential and space to do more in terms of different product offerings. Can we keep tourism in the country a little bit longer? Can we take them to other places? I think there's some ongoing efforts towards that direction. I think those are all very encouraging.
Welcome back to First Issues as we now conclude unpacking the FNB Botswana Budget Review Seminar with the economist at First National Bank Ghana, Julien Ayippey, and World Bank Country Representative for Botswana, Liang Wang. So in the end, how feasible do you think are these ambitions that we find in this year's national budget?
So if you read budgets that show reforms and resets is always feasible because you've been hit to a wall again. So the only way you have to go is forward. And that charting the course towards going forward is always easy to do because you recognize where you are as a country. And that, I believe, is very feasible. My only concern is, again, and I keep on saying that to everyone I meet, is that commitment to disciplined execution. If you're able to execute on charting the course, then the feasibility can now come into action and can now come into life. So let's not just go beyond is it feasible. Let's go beyond can we do it. I believe as a country, as Botswana, you should be able to confidently say this is something we can chart. This is something that is not dependent on politics, but this is something that as a people we want to go forward with.
Nelson Mandela has told us it's always seem impossible until it is done. I do think in Botswana there's a lot of commitment from the government to deliver. I think the Botswana Economic Transformation Program brings that spotlight on the need for disciplined execution. I think there's hope. And I think that's why I go back to where I started. The budget speech is a rallying call, in my mind, by the minister, by the vice president, by the government, to the entire government, to the entire society, to say Botswana is in a different situation today, and in order to transform with limited fiscal resources, we all need to do things differently, and we all need to do things better.
With government shifting its role to that of an enabler, the responsibility of sustainable growth now rests firmly on the shoulders of Botswana's entrepreneurs and industry leaders. And on that note, we've come to the end of tonight's installment of First Issues. Until next time, have yourselves a pleasant evening. Good night. This program was proudly brought to you by First National Bank of Botswana.